I want to call out Walgreens right now. That stock down almost 8.5% today after recording a roughly $2 billion loss. United Airlines also in the red, down almost 6.5% after they warned of nearly 36,000 were at risk for layoffs. That is roughly half of their American staff. But as we were talking about just a moment ago, those jobless claims, they were better than expected. And so for more on that, we are joined now by Seth Harris. He's the former acting Secretary of Labor during the Obama administration. Seth, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Kristin. Thanks for having me.
So I want to talk about that number. It was better than expected, slightly beating those expectations. How encouraged were you when you saw those numbers? I mean, it's the 14th week of declines, but again, still 18 million people still receiving benefits.
Well, I'll be blunt that I wasn't encouraged at all. Even though we saw a sort of small marginal improvement, we have been between 1 and 2 million unemployment claims per week for the last 6 weeks. It's just terrible news. That number, 1.31 million claims, is between 4 and 5 times the level of claims that we were seeing in February before the pandemic really struck and the shutdowns began. We're still seeing a huge amount of volatility in the labor market. As you noted, very, very high levels of continuing unemployment claims. The economy is not recovering quickly, and it's going to take a good long time before people get back to work.
So on that point of recovery, do you think that, the chances of a speedier recovery, although we all know that the recovery is going to be slow, but that any kind of gains in progress that we had been making are going to be scuppered or are in the process of being scuppered by those coronavirus case counts that are starting to spike all around the country?
There's no question that the significant spikes that we're seeing in California, Arizona, Texas, Florida, other states are doing an immense amount of damage to the economy. In some cases, the states are reclosing their economies. But really the big damage is that it's causing more and more fear among workers and consumers. Fear is the leading economic indicator in America right now. I partnered with Remesh, which is a mass online focus group company, and we talked to more than 300 workers, gave them the opportunity to tell us about their thoughts about returning to work. Only 1/3 of workers, it was a representative sample, so this speaks for all workers, 1/3 of workers were willing to go back to their workplace. And there's a meaningful racial divide there. 43% of white workers were willing to go back to work, but only 18% of African American workers and 21% of Latinx workers were willing to get back to work. That is the product of 4 months of bitter experience for those communities where they're seeing people who are still working, getting sick and dying. Workers are deeply worried about getting back to work. And until we address that fear, we're not going to be able to get the economy growing sufficiently again.
So you bring up a really good point, Seth, about fear. We hear from a lot of companies. Some have said, listen, we're going to go to a work from home environment indefinitely. Some, companies have said we're going to reopen offices in the fall, others later than that. If they can't tackle or manage that fear, do you think we could be in an environment where a company says, hey, we're going to reopen our offices in September, and workers just say, I'm not going?
I think that's entirely possible. Workers risk in some states losing their unemployment benefits if they refuse to come back to work when an employer insists on it. But my hope is that both the government and employers will take seriously the need to reopen safely. It's not a choice between open or close. It's a choice between opening or opening safely and taking all the necessary steps to make sure that workers are safe, providing them with personal protective equipment, continuing distancing in the workplace as we're doing in our personal lives, keeping workers who are sick or infected out of the workplace with paid leave or some other kind of a benefit, not letting people just sort of float through, giving people the opportunity to work from home so you de-densify the workplace. This can be done in some workplaces, not all, but in many workplaces safely, and that's what we need to do. That's what the workers in this Remesh online focus group told us they want to see. They were very specific about it.
So I want to lean on your experience, obviously, with labor. We got a plan today from Joe Biden, essentially wants to spend $700 billion to boost purchases in American goods, help R&D in American tech. And he says it's going to create as many as 5 million jobs. What were your thoughts when you saw that plan?
I think it's the right plan. Every independent analyst, the Congressional Budget Office, the Federal Reserve is telling us that we are going to have painfully high unemployment through the end of this calendar year. And if Joe Biden is elected, as I hope he is, then when he comes into office in January, we're going to need a tremendous investment, not merely in jobs, but in good quality middle class jobs that will help the economy to grow. So the plan he put out today, which focuses on manufacturing and innovation, I think will play a very important role. He talked about unionized jobs, helping workers to be able to organize unions and collectively bargain more effectively, giving them paid leave and other kinds of protections, but also creating jobs all across America so that everybody can participate in the growth. African Americans, Latinos, Latinx workers have been left behind in the past. What the vice president is talking about is trying to make sure that everybody in every part of the country has a chance to participate in the next American Renaissance.
How much does Joe Biden actually need this plan, in your mind, to compete with President Trump? The economy prior to coronavirus and the pandemic was a bright spot for him and his presidency. And right now, even though Trump trails in the polls to the former vice president on the economy, Americans say that they actually trust the president more than they trust Joe Biden. So how much does Joe Biden really need this plan, not only to get union voters back in the fold, but to get the average everyday American really on his side when it comes to the economy?
So for Vice President Biden, I don't think it's about Trump. I think it's about American working families, making sure that everyone has an opportunity to get a good quality middle class job where they can support their kids, buy a house, plan for retirement, send their kids to college, live the good middle class life that really has defined the United States since World War II. So I think that's where his focus is. I don't think he's doing it as a political tactic. I think he's trying to give the American people hope that if he wins, that we're going to help to rebuild the American middle class. And that really is critical. President Trump has really offered no plan. I'll be honest with you, and I've been listening fairly closely for it. We don't see the kind of infrastructure that he promised us. We don't see the kind of investments we promised us. His solution was massive tax cuts for the wealthy, and that really has not delivered for the American people.
All right. Seth Harris, former acting Secretary of Labor, thanks so much for today.
Thank you, Kristin.
Hey investors, Zach Guzman here. Are you interested in learning more about the markets and getting the latest financial news? Well, then click right here to subscribe to our Yahoo Finance YouTube channel. Get the latest up-to-the-minute market analysis, big interviews in the world of finance, and information on how to manage your money every day wherever you are.